But if you think about what's happening across the nation and in every industry, just population-wise, demographically, we don't have time as a nation for people to be on pause for 4 years and out of the workforce.
Yep. Yeah, that's right.
We need people working and learning at the same time.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to Framework Leadership, where we talk with leaders across the globe and explore leadership techniques, strategies, always guiding organizations to health and success. I'm your host, Ken Engel, president of Southeastern University. Today, doing it a little bit different. We're going to have an exciting conversation. I want to call this, actually, here's my big title, Edu-Revolution.
Love it.
Right.
And it's all about learning unleashed. It's essential that I think we have a good understanding where higher education is going and all the ramifications of what it means with the changes that are happening in our country, especially with a new administration coming in. One of the components of framework leadership is auditing the context. And as a university, we always try to ensure that we're auditing the context of higher education as an industry. And joining us today, we have a few members of our team that I'm privileged to have around the table for this conversation. We have Dr. Michael Steiner, who is our Senior VP of Innovation and Advancement. We also have our Senior Vice President and Provost, Dr. Meghan Griffin, who leads us in all academics here at the university. And then we have Patrick Fitzgerald, our Chief of Staff, and also going to add to our conversation today.
Yeah.
Really excited for this and where we're going to head on this.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here too. I think it's going to be really fun. I'm excited to learn a lot from you guys. You guys collectively have much, much more experience in higher education than I do. So I actually want to start just by asking Dr. Engel, one of the things you talk about all the time, working under you for as long as I have, is, that there are three key issues in higher education that we're all facing right now. Would you mind elaborating on some of those and sort of kicking off our conversation that way?
Yeah, I've always said this for a while. The landscape of higher education constantly changes, but there are three principles that are constantly changing with it. And I think the first one is accessibility. Are we giving great access, educational access to every person? Because I've always believed, and I know Southeastern believes, that everyone should have access to education. Yeah. Our mission is all about divine design. Everyone is created, and of course Ephesians 2:10 is our foundational passage for Southeastern's mission. Everyone is created in Christ Jesus, and you're a masterpiece. In other words, created uniquely because God wants to use you in a specific way. And so our responsibility is to be a good steward of the gift of life. Right. And part of being a good steward is being the best you can be. And to be the best you can be, you need education. And that's not just a one-time through, I got a degree and I'm done. Right. No, you're constantly learning and growing and developing ways to make you better. That all comes out of access. Right. So we want to make sure as a higher ed institution, we're providing access to every kind of possible program, degree, certificate, or whatever it might be to help you be the best that you can be in the calling God's placed upon your life and the industry that He's placed you in, so that you can have an impact, become a solution. We call it around here at SCU.
That's like delivery methods and creating new avenues.
You say a menu of access.
A menu of access, and not everybody needs a degree, but maybe they need a certificate. Yeah. That's why we have things like trades.
Yeah.
We have a trades program. We have a tech program where you can earn certificates and have another discipline in your skill set. So things like that.
Yeah,
the next thing is affordability. Unfortunately, the cost of education keeps skyrocketing, and a lot of that has to do, it's a combination of what the federal government requires, and we'll probably talk about that here in a little bit, but also I think institutions tend to drive up, and I'm one of those presidents, and I know our team is, we value driving. We believe it's important for the institution to try to drive down the cost of education. Yep. Now, you've got to look at education. Again, you're delivering at different levels, so when you look at a traditional program, that's going to cost something different than a non-traditional program.
Right.
Like, an undergraduate degree in a traditional campus is going to be different from an online degree. And so with a traditional campus, you've got food service, you've got athletics, there's so much cost. And you have the cost of living. So it's going to go up a little bit, but still you've got to learn to drive down. So we look at the menu. What can we provide at an affordable, with a great affordability, part of that menu. And so, one of the things we did was to create our network, and we can talk about that. Yeah. But it's driving down the cost of education. Yep. Ultimately, we would like students to graduate debt-free.
Yeah, that's right.
We just had a big Christmas event for all of our students, and they interviewed me at the beginning of it. And they asked me, Dr. Ing, if you had a wish, what would that be this Christmas? And I said, I'll tell you what I'd love, if I could have this wish fulfilled, is that somebody would give to this university in such a way that we could provide free education to every single student that wanted access
to
education. And wow. And that's what we want to strive for. And that's that affordability piece. And then I think probably the most important piece in education is to help students learn their field and practice in that field while they're learning, before they even complete their degree. A lot of students tend to wait till they get that diploma and then go out and get experience. No, start early. Start as quick as you can. What you're learning in the classroom, you want to experience it out in the field. And so we want to create experiential educational opportunities with every program on the menu.
That's right.
And we strive to do that.
And Meghan, one of the big things that you do at SU is create partnerships and avenues for our students to get connected with local and national businesses and other companies like that. Do you want to talk a little bit about partnerships and how that fits into experiential education?
Experiential education is a huge part of who we are at SEU. So it's not just me, it's really everyone here thinks that way. And it's out of that mission that we have. But learning happens in the classroom. It happens outside of the classroom. It happens everywhere on campus. It happens throughout our programs. Our students have done over 6 million hours of practicum.
That's so cool.
Over just the last 6 years, and it's every program that we offer. So that's our ministry programs, that's our trades programs. But if you think about what's happening across the nation and in every industry, just population-wise, demographically, we don't have time as a nation for people to be on pause for 4 years and out of the workforce.
Yeah, that's right.
We need people working and learning at the same time. Industry needs that. The church needs that. Healthcare needs that. Trades need that. And so education institutions have to think a little bit different about how to work with organizations so that students are learning and working at the same time.
That's really good.
And so our programs are designed so that students can do both at the same time. And what we're finding is that industry wants to partner with us. Students want to get out there and start contributing. And that's what our students are doing. So some of them are on our campus and then having great internships and practicum experiences. But some of our programs are also designed so that people are in the workplace at the beginning and earning credit as they go while they're working and learning.
The big thing I want to get across, and I think this will help us kind of dovetail a little bit, is all this is super. People who are going to listen to this, they're going to say, "Oh my gosh, why isn't education already doing this?" Right? And I've seen a lot of different people tweet different things and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, structure demands behavior. This is one thing that we talk about. And what people need to realize is that the structure set up by the Department of Education incentivizes a very specific kind of education. It incentivizes you sitting in a seat, listening to a professor for an hour and a half, 3 times a week for 16 weeks in a fall semester. That's what the incentive structure is there. And if you try and go from that format in any way, you lose access to this whole thing, and not just lose access. There are so many hoops you have to jump through. There's so many things that you have to go through. I mean, half of our time to deliver a new program for people to get access to is not spent creating the program. That we can get up like that. It's jumping through all the regulatory hoops in order for that program to be viable. And if it deviates at all from that prescripted sense, well, then it gets at risk and it gets heightened scrutiny and it gets put all this different stuff like that. And so people need to realize that the reason why higher education is the way it is today is by design. It's by design by the federal government.
And unfortunately, it's what I would call containment education with an expensive price tag.
That's right.
And what we have been, and the reason why we've had such explosive growth at Southeastern is we have unleashed that containment and tried to drive down the cost so that ultimately these students can be debt-free and go out and serve the needs of our nation, serve the workforce demands in education, in business, and healthcare, and all the things that our workforce is demanding of us to make a difference. So it's how do we get out of that?
Right.
Absolutely.
So
you're right.
So the way that I see it, we have this issue, right? We have the needs of higher education, where we need to go, affordability, accessibility, experiential education on one hand. And then on the other hand, we have the regulatory hoops that all institutions have to jump through, which are forcing students to basically sit in seat time, graduate with a piece of paper that, for a job that they're still not qualified for.
Right.
They don't have the experience to do the actual work.
And then the industry has to retrain.
Exactly.
Waste more time.
Right. And that's
money.
why a lot of major companies, maybe not a lot, but often you'll find major companies that sometimes don't even like to hire college graduates. They'd rather have the kid who went to a 2-year trade school or something like that, because they have the experience and they have way less debt. And so the question that I really want to know the answer to, and I think this is what we want to spend the majority of our time focusing on, is where do we go from here? Where is higher education moving? How do we help get it there? And what are we doing as an institution to sort of move in that direction? And maybe then we can start talking about some of the federal regulatory changes that the Trump administration is trying to accomplish. So where are we going? Where does the future look like for you three with collective 60 years of higher ed experience?
Fire away.
We have probably, I know that we're all aligned in our thinking. We probably have different ways of thinking about this, but the way that I think about it is it's almost like it's going back to the beginning. I can almost predict, Michael, how you'll think about it in terms of policy and regulation. But for me, every single thing about higher ed is about to change. But it's also going right back to the way that God designed people.
Right.
Like the way that learning happens is going back to the way God designed us. We learn in community. We learn right back to exactly what our mission is. It's about divine design. It's about calling. It's about being mentored. It's about being apprenticed. It's about being discipled. That's what learning is like. And our models work perfectly for that. The things that won't change are those foundational things. The things that will change are the things that are the structures and the behaviors we're getting rid of. Those things, the credit hours, the terms, the stuff that we all made up, the education system made up, that stuff's going away. The stuff we won't let go of, the discipleship, the apprenticeship,
formation.
The formation. That's the stuff God designed, and that's the stuff that Christian education has always been really, really good at. And so that's kind of where I see it. And so what we're doing is we're getting rid of the structures we don't need, holding on to the ones that have always been a part of God's design for human learning. And
people need to realize higher education was created as a Christian institution.
Absolutely.
Like at the beginning, before Christianity, there was no higher education. Christianity was the thing that created this whole idea that we should take the time to form, to educate, to disciple, to all that kind of stuff.
And
education
then we
was this
added
disciple.
all this stuff on top of it that added cost, added time, added a bunch of junk, and now we're just going to get all of that off and go back to the basics.
And the reason why, again, was to make things easier on the federal government. And so, give you a quick breakdown of how we arrived at where we're at today is before World War II, all higher education was private, right? There were state schools, so states would do things, but the federal government was not involved in higher education whatsoever. World War II happens. We have the war. After the war, all the GIs come back, and you have basically hundreds of thousands of men who have no skills, and the federal government needs 4 years to transition the economy from a wartime economy to a peacetime economy. Right. Well, you can't have hundreds of thousands of men sitting on their hands for 4 years waiting for the job. So what do? You pay for them to go back to college. It was so successful and so wildly incredible because we achieved this golden age in the 60s from all these men graduating and then entering industry that we said, hey, let's keep doing this. And so that's where you start seeing the first Pell Grants. You start seeing the first aids. All of that morphs into this $113 billion a year aid loan industry that ends with Barack Obama privatizing that whole thing, or not privatizing, publicizing, buying all of that student loan debt and turning it into a federal government machine and putting all of these restrictions. And what we know is that when the federal government attaches money to something, they also attach strings, right? And so what you've created is this system of dependence, right? This whole idea where you're not in charge of your education, the government is in charge of your education. And so they determine what schools get what funding. They determine what programs get different things like that.
Yeah, they hold the purse strings. And with every new administration, based on their philosophy, it can affect education delivery. And, I honestly feel like these last 4 years we've had to battle a lot of issues when it comes to delivering quality private education versus public education. But again, we have an administration that has certain values. Now we have a brand new administration. We just elected Donald Trump to return to the presidency. And since he was reelected, of course, he's made numerous promises to make sweeping changes to educational policies in the country. I mean, he's making it very clear he wants to dissolve the Department of Education, and it's going to have huge ramifications on our industry, and that's why it's so important that we talk about the values, the issues that are going to be so valuable to us as we move in this direction of providing accessibility and affordability.
And let me give you a couple facts about the Department of Education. There's a lot of stuff I've seen on internet and X and all that kind of stuff, but let me just tell you what we've got. So Department of Education was founded during the Carter era, right? So it was created during that time. It didn't exist before then. It was a sub-department. He's the one that turned it in. With that, he passes this thing called the Higher Education Act, right? This Higher Education Act is where you get things like Title IX. Everybody is familiar with Title IX. That is Title IX of the Higher Education Act. So this act lays out all of these rules and regulations that we're going to have to follow now for higher education. Fast forward, to now, to today, what we have is we have a department that is administrating $113 billion of aid, right? So that's 113, keep that number, is going to people. It's administering that $113 billion of aid using only $3.7 billion. So 3.7 operationalizes that aid. But the entire Department of Education's operational budget is $89 billion. So only 3.7 of the $89 billion actually goes to putting money in people's hands. So the question is, what is the other $85 billion doing? What is it doing? No one knows. What they're doing is they're pushing an agenda. And so you can have, right? So people ask, how can you're going to disrupt aid? Well, look, only 3.7 of it is going to aid. You can cut the other 85 and you're still getting aid. You don't touch aid whatsoever. And what we have is this Higher Education Authorization Act expired in 2011. This is something a lot of people don't know. It expired in 2011, meaning the whole thing that Jimmy Carter put in place is no longer law.
Actually, right.
It has never been renewed. Never sent all that kind of stuff. So the Department of Education is acting on regulations that they are making up.
As they go.
They go. Has nothing to do with anything that any elected official put together, anything that any of us mean. So you have this agency where you have people that serve under multiple administrations,
Will
right?
we have a FAFSA? Will we not have a FAFSA?
And they're
Michael?
just making all these different decisions, right? I think that's a great thing to talk about.
Yeah.
Is one
Yeah.
of the things they did is
What
FAFSA
happened
this-
last year.
this
Yeah,
past year.
they messed with FAFSA under the guidelines of we're going to make this better.
It was
Right.
supposed
We're
to be
going
a
to
reform.
simplify it.
Yeah.
And of course, every student parent knows when you go to college, you have to fill out the FAFSA so you can determine what kind of aid, Pell Grants, all of that. But the problem was the forms were so difficult. So that alone created difficulty. But then when they kind of withheld it, what happens is, you see, all that FAFSA information, the federal government, once the applications are turned in, then provide that information to each university
schools.
so they can send out award letters. Most award letters go out in January.
Yeah.
So most universities get their FAFSA information by December. Well, they were messing with it last year, and schools didn't receive any of that information till many of them didn't get it till April,
Right.
yeah.
of this year,
Which is a huge deal.
Yeah,
It's a
and so
big deal.
students couldn't decide where to go.
Right.
So many students were going to take a gap year.
Right.
It messed up everything, and a lot of universities, mostly private universities,
Right.
Private
suffered.
You know,
Private
didn't get
Christian.
hurt
Which
by that.
feels a little intentional.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and that's it. Talking to presidents across the nation, both faith-based and non-faith-based, but private universities felt like it was an attack
Right.
on private universities,
Right.
and they're trying to tweak on it, but it's things like that they mess with.
Ian, can you pop up this headline that I've got pulled up right here that came up? So this is from Fox News about a couple weeks ago. 70% of Biden's administration's educational enforcement targeted Christian and career colleges.
Right.
Wow.
70% of their
and
actions.
we know why,
Right.
because you're right. The structure demands behavior thing. It's like we've got to keep these public institutions solvent, and we know that they're not functional. So
Yep.
how do you do that? You shut down the other ones
Right.
Yeah.
through,
Right.
policies like this.
So you shut down the two universities who are Christian, who pioneered online education,
Right.
a new way of doing things.
Yeah.
It's all about that access.
It's all
Yeah.
about that access. These two institutions pioneered creating access that nobody had accessed before, and they targeted them to shut them down. Why? Because the government doesn't want you to have access
Right.
outside of the structures
that they want.
because in the structures that they have, they can indoctrinate.
Right.
And so they want the public institutions to succeed. They want the
Right.
Ivy Leagues to succeed, right? Because in the FAFSA situation, what the public institutions were able to do was gap fill.
Yeah.
So they said, who cares what the federal government gives you? We'll gap fill it because they have so much money. Where did they get that money from?
Right.
The government.
The government, the grants. So what you have is a consolidation of the industry
Right.
to specifically government-controlled institutions while kicking out everybody else
Right.
that's trying to use the free market to lower the cost of education and increase access. And this is coming square on the intersection between Christian and innovation.
It sounds like the government is using federal money
Yep.
to force people into the indoctrination of the
system.
state.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's why we see certain behaviors
Right. Yep.
coming out of certain universities
That's
and
right.
things like that.
Okay.
That create questions. So let's get back to now the Trump administration, the new one coming in,
Right.
wants to abolish. So let's talk about some of the key arguments for why this would be good.
Yep. Yeah.
Right. I'm very curious.
Yeah, I mean, number one, just from a dollars and cents perspective, right? $85 billion is up in question. And we can take this off the screen, Ian, if you want to, and pull all that kind of stuff. So $85 billion, number one, is off question, which at the end of the day, I don't know about you guys, but all they need to do is find $2 trillion.
I wanted to talk about what Elon and Vivek were doing.
All they need to do is find $2 trillion, and we don't have to have income tax anymore.
Yes. So this is a huge step towards that.
I mean, $85 billion right there to
a
get you
huge
to
step.
get
There
you
you
to
go.
that $2
It's a
trillion.
good start.
And so you multiply that across, I think it's like 450 government
Right.
agencies, and
Right.
you're going to find your $2 trillion. So that's number one.
Yeah.
Number two, what we need to recognize, right, is that education, and this is something, Megan, I want you to sound off on, is but even as we think about extension size, education is a local issue.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh,
Like the
that's so good.
smaller you
Local
go
governance.
down, right? The better your education
Sure.
becomes.
Yeah.
The closer the local locus of focus. So what does it mean to start pushing education back to the states and back to local communities, Megan?
It means autonomy. It
Oh, that's
means
so good.
meeting needs. It means discipleship, apprenticeship. It means accountability. It means ownership and pride. It means actual governance of our own nation. It means meeting and solving problems. It means America. I mean,
Right.
it's all the things. It's what we ought to be doing as a nation.
And this is the thing that we pioneered with the extension site.
That's
network.
exactly
And
what I
that's
was
what I
gonna
want to
say.
jump
Yeah.
off for a
Yeah.
second. If you talk a little bit about why you started it, give us a little bit about the
I
background.
was going to
of what
say,
this is.
I don't know if many of your listeners have ever heard the story of when you were a pastor out in California. I think we would love to hear that story.
Yeah, so we went into a community in northwest Los Angeles to plant a church, and we created we went through a values audit of that community. What do the people value? And we
Right.
discovered people valued education, and really, again, education boils down to stewardship. You want to be the best you can be, and you want to learn and develop the skill sets and the knowledge to be that best you can be. And so when we started this church, we thought, wow, wouldn't it be neat to provide educational stewardship in the local church for
Right.
that community?
At a community level.
That's right.
Whether
what
that
Megan's
is
talking about.
developing ministry leaders for that church, whether that's helping degree completion with business students, education. Again, what are the needs of that and providing the need-oriented program for that community. So I went to all these faith-based universities in the Los Angeles region. I mean, you can name a lot of them, from Azusa to Biola to
Call
Cal
'em out.
Baptist, Cal Lutheran.
Oh, he's
all of
calling
these.
them
Call
out
'em out.
today.
Yeah, call 'em out.
Okay, this
all
is the
of
90s.
these.
This is the 90s.
Yeah, this is a long time ago. We're not talking about any administration right now.
And again, technology's not anywhere where it is today. But I said, how about bringing education to where we're located,
Right.
and creating some type of program, whether that's certifications or things like that. And they looked at me like, you're crazy. And
Yeah.
no, you've got to come to us. You have to do residency on our campus. We don't go to where you are. And
You
I
have to
thought,
come to the
because
main
that's what
campus.
the
I
federal
know.
government
Right.
always told them had to be done.
Restriction.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, if we could unrestrict that and create a way, and I use the phrase, and we use that phrase around here,
Yeah.
take scholarship to the streets.
That's right.
Go where people are located and provide them what are those educational needs.
Right.
And so I thought, man, if I ever have the chance to shape something like that, never knowing that 30 years later I would be a university president, and when I inherited the leadership of this university and built the team that we have, we did just that. We created scholarship that could go to the streets. We
Right.
could go. And so we started a network of going into communities, finding out what are the educational needs, and developing programs that meet those needs, and
Right.
making it very purposeful to that community.
Yes.
So a degree in certain degrees in, let's say, the Los Angeles area is going to be different from providing that
Exactly.
degree
Exactly.
in Nashville,
Exactly.
Tennessee.
It's
Contextual.
the DNA
It's-
drive. That's
it's
what you
the
always
DNA
say.
drive. So we've been able to do that, and our growth exploded here
right.
because we were meeting. We unleashed that education,
That's right.
unrestricted. In fact, we created what we called the College of Unrestricted
That's right.
Education, which is what you started
Yep.
and developed. Today, what do we have? Over 200.
200, 230, 250?
Yeah, network
Yeah.
campuses, and now we're expanding across the globe. So we're definitely meeting a need, and that's what I think is the idea behind. When you
that's
abolish,
local governance.
that's local
local
governance.
community-led
governance.
education.
Now, I want to say this because there's critics out there that are going to warn that this could create disparities in educational resources and standards.
true.
So how do we combat that argument?
Show them. Just
Right.
do it.
Yeah.
Because nobody is more equipped to teach and to prepare than the local community. I mean,
great.
we can just demonstrate it. We
Yeah.
just show it.
Yeah, our extension sites have the highest number of
That's right.
first generation students, highest
They
number
do.
of diversity, minority, different things like that, highest number of Pell eligibility, socioeconomics.
That's right.
All of that is happening at this local campus. And the reason why, because surprise, surprise, when you serve students in a local community, you can drop the cost by 2/3.
That's right. And we
Yeah,
actually
and that's
have
what we
data. Highest student thriving data is at those local communities too. Psychological safety and everything else. I mean, so much more support.
And here's another thing that we need to realize when we're talking about dissolving the Department of Ed. We're not talking about dissolving accreditation and accrediting bodies. Those are still important.
Yes.
Standards for the learning need to be established. In other words, if you're taking a class, you want to make sure you master the outcomes that you need to know. So
And
we're not talking about changing that.
This is where we lose everybody because this is where other people just don't get it. They think if you're going to be able to have standards, you have to be able to absolutely control it with a closed fist.
Right.
People don't understand that you can still have standards, you can still accredit, you can still transcript without having to so tightly control.
Right.
You can have a system that works. You can have degrees that are contextual. You can have a whole network of campuses, but also be flexible and responsive.
Changing our delivery methods has never been a problem with our accreditors.
No.
It's only ever been a problem with the Department of Education.
That's right.
Yep.
Because that's where they tie their money to. So we talked a little bit about the Biden administration and their policies around higher education. We have a video that went viral on X. Donald Trump posted it, and he listed the 10 key things that he wanted to enforce with his administration regarding higher education. So I know you guys have the list in front of you. So I'd like to go down some of these things and just kind of talk about, are any of these things a concern for us? Is there anything that we should be aware of? What are the things that we're most excited for? Number one on the list, and it's the first thing he says in the video, is empower parental choice. Oh, yeah. And I mean, that's just incredible. I think we're all in agreement that, the parents should have every right to choose educational opportunities for their kids. I had my first son 7 months ago, and so obviously I want to be able to make choices about his educational future. Megan, I know this is a really important point for you. Do you want to speak to parental choice?
Yeah, absolutely. So that just means putting, it is what it is. I'm a signed member of the Declaration of Educational Independence, and I definitely believe that parents should be directing their children's education. Not only that, but that it's the parents' responsibility, not the state's responsibility or the government's responsibility for their children's education.
And choice has two sides of the coin, right? So it's not just your ability to choose whatever you want to. It's also the ability of a market to present all the options that you want.
That's so good,
And what we
Michael.
found is that with the government, what they've learned is they can allow you your choice. Right. You can choose whatever you want to. They just pick what's available for you to pick. And so if you have to choose between lessers of evils, right, you're not actually serving yourself.
Sure.
If the education you need doesn't exist, well, then you still don't have choice. And that's what they've really
It's like the
on.
choices are I can either have $100,000 of debt and get a Christian education, or I can have, $50,000 of debt and be indoctrinated into this system. It's like, well, that's not a good choice.
Right.
And
there should be another option.
And even if I go to the Christian school and I want to study psychology, well, that psychology, in order for it to count, has to be K-CREP accredited, even at a Christian school. And K-CREP accreditation says you have to teach all of this ideology.
Right.
It has nothing to do with psychology whatsoever, regardless if you're at a Christian school or not. Sure. And so if we as a Christian school want to offer a psychology degree that lets you get a job, we still have to teach it in ways that are contrary to what we believe.
And what
for
we
yourself.
need to be asking is, like you in your point before, like, why are people so afraid of other options? Like, why are you so worried about us having other choices?
Yeah. It sounds like somebody should create a new psychology degree.
It gets right back to, again, that accessibility and choice is advocating for educational options.
That's really good.
And to, again, meet your divine design.
Right.
We've got to go back. Again, the way we believe that every person has created within them this desire to serve, to make an impact, to make a difference, to be a solution. And so each one is going to need a unique educational delivery to help them do just that. And that's what choice does.
Yeah.
It provides that. I also want to talk about, when it comes to access, we're talking about delivery. A part of this also creates the ability to deliver education that's different
Yeah.
So good.
than what we've normally, because under the federal government, we're tied to the classroom.
That's
and,
right.
And we have to sit in a classroom for 15 weeks.
That's right.
9 hours a week, I don't know, 3 hours, 6 hours a week, a certain time period, and to get our credits and all of that. This kind of actually unleashes the ability to deliver that education in a different way, but yet you're still able to master the same outcomes.
Absolutely.
Talk about that a little bit.
I mean, if you think about even the K-12 space and school choice there, and I know we're talking about higher ed, but how many schools are only operating, 8 to 3, Monday through Friday on the normal year? How many more parents would homeschool if they could do a schedule where there was shift work and co-oping and that was happening on a different kind of schedule? Higher ed too. If we just got off the normal schedule and we're thinking a little bit different about how things are delivered, people would take more ownership of their own education and their children's.
And we, all the arguments for the traditional way is all around quality. But what we know, right, is that we're still graduating students that don't know anything.
Right.
So what we've learned is that sitting in this classroom,
we're not.
What we're not. We're not. But the industry, right?
Right.
And there's data across the board. We could dive into that across the board. We've got a problem, right? We're like, this problem is. What my point is, this problem is not like made up. It's a real problem.
Yeah.
Like employers are still having to re-educate. And so what we understand is just because you did this, sat in a classroom for all these hours and did all that kind of stuff, doesn't mean that you actually learned anything. And no one is actually talking about the student. And this is one of the things that I think matters and sets us apart of Southeastern and where we're going next. And, what we want to be, down the line is being student focused. How do we serve that student? How do we help them discover them? It's not about ticking a box or getting the degree. That's not what we're here. We're here for how did you discover who God uniquely wired you to do? And you see, you can't divorce that from values. And so you see, in Trump's kind of 10 keys, number 3, depoliticize the classroom. 4, cultivate patriotism. 5, reintroduce school prayer. These are all about the fact that there are certain values that you have to base your education on. And what we need is a marketplace where every school is allowed
to do whatever they want.
To teach according to the values that they have. And I'm sorry, for who we are and what we believe the Bible says, that means that there are specific things that we believe and how we cultivate our community that we're going to teach from.
Right.
If you don't want that, go somewhere else. That's fine.
It's such an important point because I think when you're talking about an economy of choice and a market of choice, everyone should be very clear about who they are, what their positions are, what their values are, what their brand identity is. Be totally clear about that and follow through on it and let people decide. Quit being fake and then hiding what your values are and kind of, in the public system, the values that are kind of snuck in or whatever. Enough of that. People are tired of that. Just be straight about what it is that you're doing and then let people decide. That's what we all want.
Yeah, and a couple of other things that I think are a part of what they want to do with higher education is let's focus on project-based learning.
Oh, yeah.
Experiences that engage the students in hands-on, and part of deliveries will kind of empower that when you look at subscription-based education or competency-based education. And then also what this does is it promotes career and work readiness because you're creating project-based learning where you're now actually stepping into what your expertise is going to be, and you're doing it even now. So I think it's exciting.
We took step 1 with that in our extension site network with Practicum. Can you give us, and then we took that to the next level with our trad campus. Can you walk through with that?
I think that whole idea is if you think about what a student is, they're not an almost person who, when they graduate, then they're
Then they
going to
become a
be
full
real.
person,
You know,
yeah.
like they're a real person now. Like God created them now. They have real gifting now. So and they want to use it. So like let them work. Let them do things. Let them solve problems. Let them contribute. That's what at the extensions that they're already working. They're serving. They're you know they're growing. They have things that they can contribute. And those like project based things, experiential learning, let them run. Let them go.
So good.
That ignites passion in them, and that helps them discover what they're great at. That helps them discover new gifting. That helps them get fired up about things, and that's where the passion to keep learning is hard.
Yeah.
And classes can be hard. Yeah. But if you're discovering more of what God has inside of you, then you have more passion to keep going. And so you've got to have. You don't want. It's not fun to sit and just do fake assignments or like just
check
mental
boxes.
exercises and you know, like you got to actually be doing things. So students are full, whole, real people ready to contribute.
So to just show you how we operationalize it, because I think this is an important thing that a lot of people don't know, but to give you kind of a behind the curtain on some educational operations, this is really good for parents when your kid walks home and they're like, I've got all these credits. What does that mean? So a bachelor's degree has to be offered at a minimum of 120 credit hours.
For now.
And we would love to see that change. But 120 credit hours is the minimum to get a bachelor's degree.
As long as there's a DOE.
Right. As long as there's, in different things like that. So 120 credit hours. What's happened at most institutions is bachelor's degrees are way bigger than that. They're 50, 150, 160, 170
Which
credits.
adds to more debt.
For no reason at all.
No reason whatsoever. So what we did is we stripped all of our programs back to that minimum 120 credit hours, meaning we're making sure you're only learning the thing that you need to learn in order to graduate. The second thing we did is we opened up everybody's degree program. So no matter what you're doing, you are having to do, I think, about a third of it, right? 25 credits?
For
practicum. Divine design practicum credits, 25 credits. So no matter what degree you're in, 25 of those credits, of that 120 credits, has to be in the field where you're working somewhere. And this is an innovation that came out of our extension site network, where our ministry students had that. And what they were doing was serving the church. They were working in the church. They were doing kids ministry. They were doing production. They were doing all this different stuff. And they were able to graduate so much more ready for their degree program because of that. And these are the little tweaks, right, that doesn't get any headline. You're not going to see anybody talk about, but it changes the program. So at 120 credit hours, now you're not stressed out every semester trying to take 20, 25 credit hours. You're only taking 15. And of that 15, 3 of them or 9 of them are working on the job. So you're actually in the field that you're supposed to be
applying
and
what you're learning,
right?
actually doing the thing.
And these are the little nuances, easy changes, right? Nothing's changed. We're within the same codes, we're within the same guidelines, all that kind of stuff. But you have to have that desire to serve students, that missional design that we want students to form in order to make that jump that most colleges just don't have.
Yeah, and you know that's how I started my first career. You know, when I was 18 years old, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I had a great mentor in my life that said, follow your passion. What is it that deep down you love? And I loved communication. So I thought, well, I don't know where I'm going to go to college. I don't know what I want to study for sure, but I'm going to jump in and follow my passion. And one of my passions was broadcast. And I decided to take a broadcast writing course. Well, guess what? The teacher happened to be the news director at the local NBC station. He said, Kent, I see what you're doing already. I see your passion. I'm going to get you on as an intern, and you can get started learning. And so I started, and I learned how to write, to edit, how to do interviews. And that's while I'm a freshman taking my first class. And I was already, and that was just personal design. What we want to do is take something like that and intentionally design where they can learn in the classroom and actually do it in the field. So 3 months into that, I get the job as the weekend sports anchor. And I'm just a freshman and I'm just 18 years of age. And for the next 10 years, did that in my life and continued to advance. But it was that experiential piece that was added to my learning, which is what we're talking about.
You were so ahead of the curve. I mean, like so ahead of the curve.
And at the end of the day, all of this different stuff, lowers the cost of education.
It does.
The more you're committed to actually serving students, the more you're going to find these different things. And I want to end talking about what's a lot of people don't know. Just recently introduced, it's in committees, if I understand. It's called the College Cost Reduction Act. HR 6951, introduced by Workforce Chairman Virginia Fox, who's
been here.
Yeah.
been on Framework Leadership.
Yes.
We love you.
her.
We love you, Chairwoman Fox. We love you, Chairwoman Fox. If you listen to this, we're your biggest fans. She's the one that taught us.
She's really fun.
She's super fun. We love her, and she is. She's at the forefront of this, right? She's been trying to get the Higher Education Reauthorization Act reauthorized, all that kind of stuff across the board. But she introduced this act, College Cost Reduction Act. The whole idea is to incentivize. It's that structure demands behavior. So we're going to incentivize colleges lowering cost by putting them on the hook for a degree. Makes sense. And there's a lot of that headline that we're totally cool with. And so the idea is, whatever students borrow, the university is on the hook as long as the cost keeps going up. But what they've done is, if the cost goes down, if they bring the cost of higher education down, then you get actually bonuses. So now you get increased funding. The idea is we're gonna give you a stick if you increase, but we're going to give you a carrot to lower the cost. So the problem with the bill as it's written is, as great as that headline is, it is still focused on a traditional model of education. Correct. So the idea is that you only get access to the Promise Grant if you lower the traditional tuition, right? So the main campus traditional tuition, if you lower that tuition, that's the only way. That gives you no points, no credit if you launch a new program that starts at 2/3 the cost. So what they're looking for is to drive this cost of education out, which, as Dr. Engel outlined, there is so much wrapped up to why traditional education is the way it is, not the least bit government spending, inflation. And if you want to understand how inflation works, if I can give you a quick macroeconomic lesson, what the University of Penn State unveiled is that for every $1 increase of federal aid, traditional tuition goes up 60 cents. That's called inflation right there, government-driven inflation. So, in this sense, we're all still talking about this 4-year experience. What we need our regulators, time credits. What we need our regulators to understand is that's the system that's the problem.
That's broken.
And you need to start incentivizing us doing something different. So when we launch our extension site network, it's 2/3 the cost, right? We're dropping cost of education dramatically. Tuition is on average about $9,000 a year. $9,000 a year at these places.
How many other institutions are mad about that?
Right, so many.
A lot.
But we don't get any credit for that in this act as it's currently written. So this is some of the things that we need our legislatures, and if you're listening to this and you're a legislator, you need to understand is that it's not just about tackling these traditional campuses. It's about incentivizing people who are actually serving and creating new ways of doing it.
Absolutely.
It's so
That's
good.
so
That
good.
is good.
Well, we've just scratched the surface
I
as
know.
to all these wonderful things that can and will happen in higher education. And I want all of our listeners, if you enjoyed this, stay tuned, because we're going to probably have another podcast. We'll maybe add another voice or so as well to what we're talking about. But again, this is an important issue for people across this nation.
Yeah.
And again, it's all for the purpose of helping people to be solutions to the issues and challenges, people groups, things that are happening literally around the world. And we just need to be educated and be the best that we can be in those things. So I want to thank you all for joining us on Framework Leadership today. We're grateful for this conversation, and for all of you for joining in and providing your unique insight that you've given to everybody listening.
Yep, and if you're listening, remember, stay up to date with all of our podcasts, newsletters, social media. Hey, if you want us to do more content like this, send us an email. If you're listening to this right now, just pop up your email, send it to us, email the team and say, hey, we want more content like that. Share it with your friends, repost it across the board. We need to hear that. We need to know that. And so wherever you're getting your podcast, that's where you can find Framework Leadership Podcast. Make sure you're subscribing to our newsletter, weekly newsletter, where we cover a lot of topics like this, keep you updated on these things. You can sign up for a newsletter at kentengel.com, and make sure you're following us on all the social media channels. Lots of content, lots of different articles on these kind of issues. And so thank you so much for listening to Framework Leadership, and we'll see you next time.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Framework Leadership. If you're watching on YouTube, now would be a great time to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button so you can get incredible leadership content right to your YouTube feed. You can also check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts every single week, Framework Leadership. And if you love great email newsletters, and I know I do, make sure you check out keningle.com and subscribe to the Framework Leadership newsletter. It's an incredible piece of content we put out every single week of amazing leadership resources right to your inbox. Make sure you check it out. You can also follow us on Instagram at Kent_Ingle, at Dr. Michael Steiner, on X at Kent Ingle, and on Facebook at Kent.Ingle. Stay up to date on all the incredible things happening on the podcast and at Southeastern University. We love you guys, and we love our followers and our subscribers. Thank you so much for listening to the Framework Leadership Podcast.